Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. I am George Armistead. This is Life List, a birding podcast. I am here with my co-host, my partner in crime, Alvaro Jaramillo. Al, what's happening?
Hey, how's it going? Like, it sounds like you've had a lot of coffee or something. You're really, you're really high energy
today.
and
I had an afternoon cup of coffee. That's very unusual for me.
I spotted it. I could see what was happening. I, on the other hand, have survived another pelagic trip yesterday, and I am again tired.
Yeah, a little bit peaked over there. Looks like.
Yeah. It's the end of this, getting to be the end of the season, so it's number 30 something for the year.
You're a glutton for
punishment. I know. Yeah, but we have fun things to talk about that include birds that have an ocean component to them, but maybe not fully pelagic. Some of them are today.
Yeah.
Hint.
Yes, long awaited. We have been talking about this one for some time. We are privileged to have a friend with us today who knows more about a group of birds that is extremely near and dear to us, and that group is the gulls. Today we have Amar Ayyash with us. He is the leading authority on gulls of North America. He hosts the website anythinglaris.com, administers the North American Gulls Facebook group, and has coordinated the iOS annual Gull Frolic for the last 13 years. Amar is often found speaking at birding events throughout the continent, and much of his free time is dedicated to traveling the world to photograph and study gulls. He is a regular contributor to premier birding magazines and journals and is the author of the upcoming, now very soon to be out, Gull Guide. Amar lives in the Chicagoland suburbs with his family and has been teaching high school math for the last 20 years. Amar, it is really a thrill and a privilege to have you here. How are you doing today, man? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Alvaro. What a pleasure. What an honor to be here with you guys, finally.
Yes. The Gull Guide, man. We've been waiting on this one. It's been a long time coming. It must feel good.
Oh, it's a big relief. As both of you know, both of you have authored books, and you know what it's like to finally be done with a project that consumes you for several years. So it's kind of weird being done now.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
I don't know. Maybe start working on something else to busy myself. Model toy trains or something.
There you go.
The Turn Guide.
Yeah. It's wild. It's got, I mean, when did the seed for this book kind of first firmly take hold for you, Amar?
I asked myself that same question. It was probably around 2012. But the Howell and Dunn Guide had just been out for about 5 years. And so I thought, there's no way anybody wants another gull book right now. So I'll just commit myself to my website. And I proceeded to just document things and record things on anything Laris. And when enough material needed updating from the Howell and Dunn Guide, I approached Steve Howell. I asked him if he was going to work on a second edition of his book. And he's like, that's impossible. No way. It's not going to happen. He had no interest. And so
impossible.
Yeah. So when
should have called it the Impossible Guide,
Yeah. When I heard that and learned that from Steve, who told me personally in person, I thought, okay, yeah, maybe there's a chance of doing this. And so 2018 is when I officially began writing it.
Wow. It's a long road.
Yeah.
So, you strike me as a person who's really interested in gulls more so than other birds. Like, would you consider yourself sort of like truly like a guller and all other birding is secondary, or is this just, you decided to write a book on this and all birds are kind of on your plate of things that you look at and think about?
Okay. So when I first started with gulls, I had no notion of birding. I didn't know anything about organized birding or bird books, listing. So my thing began just kind of looking at seagulls. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
called them. And then I just stumbled upon birders at different sites I would go to. People looking at ducks and looking at gulls and looking at everything else. And so from bumping into people, I eventually learned these folks are actually serious about looking at all birds. And so I tinkered with listing for a few years. And once I learned about things like Ross's gull and ivory gull, I was right back to it. I was right back to looking at the seagulls. And I don't know, Alvaro, to your question, I don't regularly go out and look at other birds. I mean, the pelagic I did with you a couple of weeks ago was probably the most I've looked at other groups of birds in a few years.
They're kind of gull-like, though, aren't they? So shearwaters and albatross, you're sort of like, oh, okay,
Jaegers almost feel
Jaegers,
same genre.
You got to be out in the open. You got to look in the water in the distance. I like that.
Yeah, that's good. And I always sort of say to people that gulls are the best subjects because they are in the open, and you can put your scope out. You can sometimes even bring them in closer, but they're there. They sit there, and you can look at them for hours. Yet they're complicated enough that you often need to look at them for hours. And there may not be any group that is quite like that. Where you could go into a flock and come out with unidentified birds after studying them, right, for a long time. Like what else sort of is like that? And then I can see why they could, in a sense, become your soul, your major passion, I guess, in the bird world. I understand that. I'm kind of, a gull fanatic myself, but
I think most people would agree with that. Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. Like, what do you tell people about the fact that no matter how much you know, you need to be like comfortable with not getting to the full answer on some of these birds, and it, how do you reconcile the fact that you have a bird ID guide that you've created that will only get people a certain way because the thing is so complex?
Yeah, it's there's no promises, there's no guarantees. Even when you have a good guide, there's always going to be unknowns, and you have to kind of go into it knowing you're not going to identify every gull in every flock, just like you said a few moments ago. And if you approach it with that attitude, I think it's a lot easier to just kind of enjoy it for what it is. And there is definitely nothing wrong with leaving birds unidentified and just learning from what it is you're seeing and kind of just using that to build a frame of reference. And I think we call that experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And do you have situations where you've photographed birds, you have your notes on them, and then years later you go back and realize now you know what they are, that you've let them simmer for years? And has that happened to you?
Yeah. That's the evolution of where I was, say, just 10 years ago compared to now. Like there's photos I go back to where I thought I used to have a lot more Nelson's gulls here on Lake Michigan, or there was even a time period where I'd go down to Florida and I was sure I was seeing first cycle yellow-legged gulls. And looking back at them now, I'm like, oh, well, those are just weird lesser blackbacks. Having seen thousands of lesser blackbacks now, I think it's just widening those goalposts and learning more about the amount of variation in those species like herring gull, yellow-legged gull, and lesser blackbacks. But certainly, Albro, there's photos I go back to that I had tagged as possible Nelsons, and now it's just a pale herring.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have some that are your like nemesis photos, like beautiful birds that you saw and studied for a long time that no matter what, you just still can't figure them out, and it's not some clear-cut hybrid either?
Yeah. I have a first cycle from Northern Illinois. Until this day, I look back at it and I'm like, is this a first cycle slatyback? Is this some weird glaucous wing herring? I have no clue. And at the time,
Yeah.
I think you commented on it, and a few other friends commented on it and thought, yeah, why not? First cycle slatyback. But until this day, I haven't put a label on that bird. And I go back to it from time to time, and it just looks so different than everything I've seen. Probably one of my favorite first cycles that I just can't give a label.
No labels.
No labels.
No, I've really enjoyed your book. It is, before we started, George mentioned it's a beautiful book. It really is. It's and I I'm a visual person, so I tend to look at the photos, but I really do find this one, if you read it, you really get the full extent of the detail that you put into it. So I've been reading bits as questions have come up. So I'm, reading snippets here and there, depending on the species. And I'm thinking, he's thought of everything. He covered it all.
Oh, thank you, Albro. Well, look, beside wanting to compile the best photos ever curated for this group of birds, I wanted the text to be rich. I wanted something for intermediate birders, intelligent, advanced birders like yourselves, and beginners. I wanted something for everyone, and I wanted the book to stand the test of time. So hopefully the text there will be relevant for the next decade. But you know how books are. Things are obsolete before the book even goes to print. But I think a lot of the information in there, the information on the common gull complex, the yellow-legged gulls, the slatyback gulls, I think a lot of that is going to be relevant for the next decade or so, hopefully.
Yeah. The taxonomy essay at the beginning I thought was pretty masterfully succinct as well. Like, I imagine when you first sat down to, write this, and I imagine that part might have even been much towards the end of the writing of the book, but writing an essay on taxonomy of gulls, I would think would be a really daunting task. And I think you've got it down to 3 or 4 pages where you just keep it to the important stuff and you don't try to get too much in there. And I really enjoyed that essay. There's some real great stuff in there. And I think that's a great place for folks to begin with this book. And it is, after all, right at the beginning. So
yeah. The short of it is most gulls are not a problem, but the genus Laris still is problematic. As you guys know, the northern taxa seem to cluster by locality, and they don't obey any neat species concept. If you think about it, especially things like glaucous wings and westerns, or glaucous wings and herrings. And I don't know that we'll ever have, at least in our lifetime, enough genetic data to figure all that out. Albro, you and I have talked about once we get to the subgenomic level, hopefully a lot of that will be clarified. But what do you do with things like western and glaucous wing that are hybridizing for millennia, probably hundreds and hundreds of years now? Are we witnessing a species in the making, or is this just a contained hybrid zone? What do you make of Olympic gulls?
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about this. So the genomic full gene kind of work that people are starting to do now. And then there's a group that is in Europe that is doing it on the big white-headed gulls. So they're going to have samples from all over, and they're going to actually come up with obviously stuff that's new and different to us. We don't quite know what it'll be. And my question to you is not, it's almost more like a fantasy question. What would you like to have resolved? Like if something got resolved, let's say from this crazy genetic stuff, what would your dream be to sort of have something kind of pulled out of this? And this is a fantasy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to have science. It's almost more like emotional.
I'm definitely shifting right now because that would be definitely the Iceland complex. And what the heck is happening with the Iceland gulls? And is Kumlin's gull an incipient species? Is it a hybrid? What is really happening up in the Arctic? So that would be number one, just the Iceland gulls, for us to figure that out. But let's say we did, and this is a conversation we've had on North American gulls. We're always going to have these problematic intermediate birds that you can't in the field do anything with. You're just going to be left with this thing. Could be a Thayer's, it could be a Kumlin's. Even if the genetic data clarifies all that, we're still going to have that going on in the field like forever. But yeah, it would be the Iceland gulls, to answer your question.
Yeah, I thought you probably would say that. That's the one.
So you know me well enough. It would be that, or it would be I don't know. I mean, the glaucous gulls pale in comparison. We probably have 2 or 3 different glaucous gulls.
Yeah. I've always thought about glaucous gulls that we've been tricked by the fact that the adults are white-winged and look similar, but then you look at all these youngsters that look quite different depending on where they come from. And I thought, I wonder if glaucous gulls actually more than one species. That sort of came up years ago, and how could you figure it out without any DNA or anything like that? It really is waiting to be sorted out by a technique that is not us just looking at them.
Definitely.
One of the things I thought was interesting is you do talk about the names of and the eponyms a bit. Yeah. And some of our favorite gulls are going to have their names changed soon. And what was it you said? I think it was about Sabin's gull. I really liked this. It was like, whatever future name there is for this bird must be held to the highest of standards. And I was like, yes. It's like, protect this bird.
Definitely. Oh man. So close to like a year before submitting the final manuscript, this whole thing came out with the eponyms, and I panicked for a little bit. I was getting in touch with authors. What do I do? And people are like, there's nothing you're going to do. You're going to publish your book, and people are just going to scratch off Sabin's gull and pencil in whatever the new name is. And it probably won't unfold for another 5 to 10 years before it's all said and done. So, Sabin's, if we're talking about new names, Sabin's should be held to a high standard. And I'm thinking, I don't know, elegant gull or fork-tailed gull, but
elegant
even that,
gull, I like, yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be I've joked that because it's got a yellow bill tip, it should be sandwich gull, like the tern. It's a joke, right? But, George is the guy who suggested that the Smithsonianus American type herring gull should be just called the seagull. So he's, I don't know if he should be talking about bird names here because I think he seriously argues this is a good name.
I definitely seriously do. Yeah, I think we should give the people what they want, and I love that the foremost authority on this group of birds on the continent on page 4 of his book uses the term seagull, for the first time, and it appears multiple times. In your case, actually, it does actually have within the book sort of a useful handle in that you kind of unite all the birds in the genus Larus, more or less, under that term, right?
Yeah. So your standard, what your average person thinks of when you say seagull, they don't know of like Bonapartes or say swallow-tailed gull. Most people picture something that looks like a herring gull or a ring-billed gull when you say seagull, right? I'm sure people on the Atlantic have laughing gull in their search image, or people on the Pacific probably have western gull or Heermann's gull. But I think the Larus species being so terrestrial, it's kind of ironic that they're the ones that get called seagulls.
Yeah.
The I joke with George, but sometimes there is that element if people do have a concept that is already sort of in their mind, why not allow it? Like, why do we have to be so rigid with things? Obviously, the AOS would never allow the seagull to be, the name for the herring gull, but there's an element of, I think, when somebody says that, oh, I just saw a seagull, I usually don't correct them in the angry way that a lot of birders do. That birders will say, no, it's not a seagull. It's not even by the sea. You know what? It doesn't matter. The person knows what they're talking about, and they've given you a handle and of what it is, and you understood what they're talking about. That is communication. It's fine. It's maybe not formal communication, but it's fine.
100%. I agree with you. I see birders berate and down talk people who use the term, and to me, it's really not that serious. If this is the biggest problem you have when it comes to gulls, then you're doing all right. I give people a pass all the time. I never correct people on it.
Well, and I think it's great to think that, yeah, like I say, you're the preeminent authority, and you started with this group of birds, right? And you started calling them seagulls. You still call them seagulls. It wasn't like your spark bird was a scissor-tailed flycatcher sitting on a wire someplace, or, like you liked the seagulls. I mean, if it's good enough for Amar, it ought to be good enough for anybody. But for all the people, because there's a lot of people out there, right, that gulls are intimidating for. And how would you tell them to begin or to get a toehold?
Well, I think as soon as you become a birder, you're almost immediately tutored to not like gulls, or that they're difficult. It's definitely cliched, and you'll hear experienced birders, intermediate birders, always bemoaning this fact that gulls are impossible, gulls are too difficult. And I think as a new birder, you hear this and you start to avoid gulls for whatever reason. There are better groups of birds to be looking at, more colorful birds, more songful birds. But if you're thinking about taking the deep dive, and this is a perfect time of year to do it, start with, some common advice is to start with the adults and start with your most common species. Don't go out looking for slatyback gulls when 90% of what you're seeing are western gulls, and don't go looking for Kamchatka gulls if most of what you're seeing is ring-billed gulls. So learn your common species, begin with adults, and then don't be intimidated by learning plumages. There's absolutely something to be said about learning just some basic precepts of molt and plumage when it comes to this group of birds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always tell people that you can even simplify it to the point when you're learning the plumages of saying 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, it's not quite correct, but if they fall into these patterns of the molt being annual, the major molts being annual, that you can kind of simplify it and not have to worry about, is this specific part of the molt started or not? Oh, don't worry. Is it a brown thing, or is it have a gray back, or that's sort of how I also tell people about the different ages. Is just don't get stuck on the details. People get stuck on the details. The leg color. People get really stuck on leg color.
Don't start with orbital ring color.
No,
orbital ring.
No. I try not to ever drag beginners into the weeds, because it's a turnoff. It's a turnoff. You have so much to look at and so much to enjoy, and then somebody's talking to you about the formula of lesser blackback identification by wingtip. You definitely got to know your audience. If I'm sitting at a table with you guys, we could talk about these things. But if somebody's just now learning the difference between a gull and a duck,
yeah,
we're not going to talk about P5s and P6s and first cycle and second cycle. We'll go with brown. It's immature and maybe a first year or second year, and move on.
I got to ask a question about there's a plate you have that it's a painted plate of all the gull wings in that Kumlings, Thayer's, Iceland group. And it's pretty cool, from the palest to the darkest, with every individual feather on the wing painted on, so you can see the variations, as they change in this group. But it really reminds me of when I was a kid looking at the birds of Canada that had this plate that had these wings. And it was the first time I ever saw the name Thayer's gull and, Kumling's gulls described. Did you have any inspiration from those old works, or did this kind of come up separately for you, completely like independently?
No. Do you remember the article by Howell and Elliott? It was like 2001, I want to say. It's about almost 25 years ago now.
Uh-huh.
They attempted to categorize pale Thayers, dark Thayers. And so when Thayers got lumped, I said, well, why not put all three subspecies on one page? So that was the inspiration, I think, the Howell article. Yeah.
That's interesting. Have you ever seen the Birds of Canada? That you have it. Yes. Yeah. That was an interesting. That was ahead of its time, but he also had more specimens, I think, of these things than anybody else at that time. So he knew things others didn't. So
in the commentary, I don't know how far you've gotten into the book, but in the commentary on the Iceland complex, I do talk about Godfrey's input on the Iceland complex and how he was convinced that based on all these specimens from these different geographic regions, that these things are all just bridged by individual variation. He and Snell, both of them together, came to that conclusion. But they've looked probably at more specimens than anyone else I know. I can't think of anyone else alive or even in the last 30 years who's looked at that many specimens of Iceland gulls.
Yeah.
You definitely have to take their word and kind of put it on the scale. And everyone else who hasn't been to the breeding grounds has limited input in this complex, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true.
Although I gather some people have published on the breeding grounds without actually having been there, right? Isn't that the case for Thayer's gull in particular?
No. Well, I'll let Amar's view of this first, and I'll give you mine.
It almost felt like you were hinting at Neil Smith there. I don't know if that's
that's kind of
where
what
you're going.
that's kind of what I was alluding to. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that put behind the study of Thayer's Gull. I would say that put us behind probably a good 30, 40 years. That taxonomy just sat in limbo for that long. Around the time he was publishing his dissertation, there were already ornithologists and researchers who were suggesting it looks like Kumlins and Thayers are interbreeding, or it looks like we're not able to distinguish between the two. But we went ahead and just called Thayers a species in the 60s because of that dissertation.
And the backtrack on it is that this guy Smith falsified his data. He actually did go to the Arctic, George. He was actually there. Okay, right. And he did publish also stuff on common ring plovers and other things, but it was really a lot of work that was done there. If you read his stuff, and it didn't seem humanly possible. So this guy, Richard Snell, went and redid the work, and that's when he uncovered that it basically had all been falsified. And he had various actually unique ways of actually confirming this, including talking to the people that had worked on, were the helpers on the original. But just as a side note, Snell was finishing up all of his work. His PhD had been defended and so forth with my supervisor. So I came in as a grad student, master's student, as Snell was finishing up. I was starting on a project on cowbirds. So we overlapped for a little bit and used to talk gulls. And he's quite an interesting person because he had a different way of looking at things, and probably that's why he took on this crazy project and try to unravel not only a difficult taxonomic project, but a difficult human problem, which was that he was convinced, I think, when he went in there, that he was going to find that it was not as expected, the results. So thinking that somebody had fudged the numbers, let's put it that way. And that's indeed what everybody agrees on now. So,
yeah. It was actually quite sobering when I was doing my research and going to different collections. I handled the collection that Smith, part of the collection that Smith painted orbital rings on. So I was looking at glaucous gulls and Thayer's gulls that he painted orbital rings on, and these birds were messied with paint on their breasts and on their backs. And basically, he said he drugged something like 80 pairs of birds and induced hybridization from just painting orbital rings. Very, very imaginative, very creative work.
Wow.
And at the time, what's crazy about this is at the time, most graduate students were reading this in belief, thinking, wow, this guy's a genius. And it kind of gave people ideas about what bare parts are for and what isolating mechanisms exist and don't exist in birds. So he had quite the imagination.
Got to commend him for that.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, as if Thayer's Gull wasn't complex enough already. You've got to throw all that into the mix.
Yeah. No, it's like another completely different kind of question is how I noticed you used a massive number of different photographers, and what was your idea on the photography? What were you looking for, and were you also just looking to have input from varied folks as part of the strategy of your book?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I had almost enough photos to where I could have probably done most of the large gulls myself. But there were things I needed. I needed good photos of Ross's gulls. I needed good photos of Sabins and some of the hybrids. I couldn't pull that off on my own. But in instances where I even had the photos, I still looked at other people's photos for more detail, more clarity, better resolution. So there were times where I was tied between, do I use my photo of this third cycle California Gull, or do I use, Paul Fenwick's because it shows the wingtip a little better? So the decision making usually went with, I have to use the more clear photo, the better photo. But I actually enjoyed pulling all these folks together and having them contribute photos. So part of that may be an underlying motive. I don't know, Alvaro.
Yeah. There's a lot of different names you see here. So I thought that was interesting, because sometimes people will rely on their own, or they have their 2 or 3 go-to people on a photo-oriented book. And I found that it was refreshing that you had such an assortment of different people involved. And, it's neat.
It is lavishly illustrated. It really is. And I think you got 17 photos of, glaucous great blackback gull hybrid as an example for folks, and a similar number for great blackback herring gull hybrids. It's just cool to see a collection. It was also nice to see, a lot of our buddy Tom Johnson's photos in there, really some of his best. And as somebody who really loved gulls, I think it comes through in those images of the Ross's gulls, for instance, and some of his other picks.
Oh yeah,
it's fun to look at.
He was so generous with his photos. He would photograph something. I don't know. I think he was on St. Paul or something. He'd send me a photo. Hey, do you think this is a glaucous wing glaucous? I'm like, I don't know, but I'll look at it some more. And then a couple of days later, I'd get back to him. He'd have another one. And so some of the hybrids, the Ross's gulls, as you mentioned, some great photos that he and even photos from Pennsylvania of those lesser blackback herring hybrids.
Yeah, and our Vega gull that we had, that was a big one.
Vega, yeah. But a lot of people donated photos, and they were just sending me links to albums, just take whatever you need. And I was very grateful. And the book is better for it.
What do you think about the situation we're going to have probably in a week, where the eBird taxonomy is going to separate some of these gulls as valid species on eBird, yet they won't be separated by the official AOS committee. So herring gull, Vega gull will become a real thing on eBird. Do you think that's just it's confusing, or do you think it's just the way it should be for now, as as different groups kind of evolve in their thinking, or do you think it's are you certain that it's a good decision to even split them? I mean, what's your kind of viewpoint of all this?
Well, I think it's going to get messy really soon, just having these different opinions all at once. But I'm not sure about American herring and Vega. But I think we are sure European herring should be a species separate from American herring. I don't know about you, but my inbox for the last month and a half has just been flooded with potential Vega gulls. Are people sending you this too, and not CCing us on the same emails? Or because
no, I just tell them, send them to Amar.
Because I have in the last month and a half, probably, I'm not kidding, over 15 possible Vega candidates that people want opinions on. And it's great that people are pulling these out of the X-Files right now. But I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure what the genetic data is on Vega and American herring. But I do know when I look at them, I see two different things. And the orbitals, here we go with orbitals. The orbitals being different colors and just the head streaking and the wingtips, I think they're different enough. But then I'd sound like a big hypocrite with keeping Thayers and Glaucoides as one species. So I'm not sure about the Vega and American herring, to be honest.
So within the book, you maybe tell folks your approach with the herring gull complex, because, I mean, to date, it's pretty, I mean, it's kind of unique within ornithology, this pervasive, what people think of as a species largely until the last few years. It's called the herring gull complex, and that's an appropriate term for it, and for more than one reason.
Yeah. So in the book, I do give them each their own species account. I do go with like Adrian's and all, and Peter Harrison, because they have just split all three of these things. And now there's even the question of Mongolian gull and what we do with that. I don't know if there's ever been a good Mongolian gull in California or even Alaska. I don't know.
I don't think so. Yeah.
But it is a concern. Like, if people have emailed me asking about Mongolian gull, people from Korea who I don't even know, and I have no clue what to say about Mongolian. But yeah, in the book, they're treated as three species: Vega, American herring, European herring, and they each get their own account and fully treated with, I think American herring has something like 90 plates. Vega has something like 45 plates. So it's great motivation for people to get out and find some dark herrings. Hopefully they start popping up more now that people are going to be looking at herrings more.
Yeah. I do think, though, when you're mentioning people sending you the photos, obviously gulls are really difficult, and sometimes expertise is incredibly important. But I would say we've gotten into this birding culture today where people just want the final answer. They don't actually want the process as much. And maybe I'm being kind of old school, but I really like when somebody sends me a photo and says, I think this is a Vega gull. I thought about it here, and I looked at the feathers here, and lead me through their thought process, rather than, this is a weird one, could it be a Vega gull? That doesn't spark any interest.
Right. Alvaro, can you please rubber stamp this?
Yeah. It doesn't, and it doesn't make me excited about the idea of looking through it. But if somebody's already put in time and effort and thought into it, and they're kind of, I really enjoy those. Just sort of a note to folks to say that that's the fun part, figuring it out, and don't avoid the work, because it ends up being the fun part. The answer is not as fun as the process, I think.
Yes, definitely. The process, the journey.
The journey. Yeah. But I could see that you would probably get flooded. You're just lucky you're not also a pipit expert, because you'd be getting all the Siberian pipit records photos from like random. Oh. This one looks really dark. Is it one, Amar? Send all your pipits to George.
I was with Greg Neese yesterday, and he pulls out pipit photos and starts to show me things from like a decade ago, and I'm like,
not interested.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
They're too hard.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
I think it's important for folks to realize too that while we're talking a lot about the challenging big white-headed Laris, that there is also a lot of time devoted to the dainty, cute, elegant, smaller gulls, and like, yeah, there's some good gull porn here in this book in all sorts of ways. Like, there's an image that I really liked. I think it was number 35. It looks like I noted, of the Sabins gulls, where you've got, I think it was Jay McGowan's picture, and it was like, it's like 3 Sabins, 3 Bonapartes, and like there's a little there's a little Easter egg, in that photo as well, and so there's fun stuff to look for. Like you insert some nice nuggets along the way, like how there's good the overviews that you present in each species. Has really good stuff that is valuable. We learn about red-legged kittiwakes, how they differ in behavior from black-legged kittiwakes, and how they're vulnerable due to climate change. So there's stories that are told within these accounts as well. There's birds. There is one bird that is, deemed among the most coveted bird species in the world, and also the least known of all gulls, with less than 1% of its world breeding population accounted for. You mentioned how there's only one gull species with a Kodak grayscale of 0. There's a species that is seen by the thousands annually in the ABA area and is assumed to nest here, but has still never had a pair documented as nesting. And then another one I liked was that there is one gull whose genus is devoid of any known meaning. So if you take some time with those accounts, there's a lot of fun stuff to learn.
Yeah, I thought it was a light way to open up each of the accounts with an overview, with some just neat nuggets and tidbits that people don't often think about. So it mixes it up and keeps it interesting, I think. But that actually surprisingly took a good amount of time to write those overviews and to find information that was meaningful enough to put on pages. But if you have the time, gentlemen, to read through the introduction of the yellow-legged gull account,
is there an Easter egg in there or something we could add?
Well, I come to the conclusion it's probably the most obscure gull in North America. And I come to the conclusion that there's probably no good records of them anywhere along the Atlantic outside of Newfoundland.
Huh.
Even that long-staying bird in Georgetown, was it Georgetown Reservoir landfill there in BC? Everybody went and twitched that thing.
I go through the Claudia Wild stuff from the 90s, and you just have to read it. And I think records committees and eBird reviewers are going to be interested in it. But I did my homework, and it took me about 6 months to write that account. I kept going back and forth with folks who had access to the specimens from the 70s from Quebec, and then went back to folks in Europe who know yellow-legged gulls, like Peter Adrians, for example. And gentlemen, I don't think we have any good yellow-legged gull records to hang our hat on.
Wow.
Outside of Newfoundland, and even some of those birds, Bruce McTavish, I think, will admit, they could be lesser blackback herring hybrids, some of those birds that they had. And there's less and less of them found these days. Either people are easing off their ID or they're really just evading people.
Right. So the most commonly asserted species that is the next new ABA bird to be found has been the same one for what I would say 30 years, and it's never been found, and it's not that hard to identify.
Nope.
Mediterranean gull. Why does Mediterranean gull get suggested as the next one to show up, and it never does? Do you have any ideas?
No, but it's embarrassing at this point because we've had Pallas's gull, we've had gray gull, and I bet Mediterranean gull probably never makes it here. It'll probably be Caspian gull next or something.
Audouin's gull is going to
Audouin's gull.
Yeah.
It's striking to me. Yeah. So on the vagrant side of things, what's your thought on the fact that some Asian gulls are regularly almost more easily found in the east or even the Northeast Great Lakes region than they are in the West, where we're closer to Asia? Like, do you have any kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah. So in the Kamchatka gull chapter, and it does get its own account, but it's treated as a subspecies of common gull. That's a question that I ask, like, why are so many found in the Northeast now along the Atlantic seaboard? And I don't know if they're not found on the Pacific, but I'm sure if they are, they're probably just being passed off as dark short-billed gulls or large short-billed gulls. I mean, they do overlap in gray coloration. And I know just from a couple years ago when I was on Vancouver Island, I saw some dark short-billed gulls they're short-billed gulls, but they're noticeably darker than everything else in the flock.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of that could be happening, Alvaro, but I'm sure there's something we're missing. I even asked, could they possibly be coming over the Atlantic? And that doesn't make a lot of sense because they're not seeing them anywhere in Northern Europe or Western Europe. So I don't know. They're probably coming over Arctic Canada or something.
Right. And there's the slatyback gulls, out in the east and northeast. There have been Vega gulls, yet I'm not sure that there's been a proper Vega gull found in Washington, Oregon. I'm not sure, or BC. It's one of those things that it's sort of striking. And I do wonder if the point you made about them being findable because in the East you don't have anything that's quite as similar might be the key. So in the West, we have Western gulls, which are dark, so slatybacks and Vegas kind of get lost in the shuffle, while they might stand out more on the East or Northeast because they just, look dark. So they immediately attract your attention or something like that's happening. But even that doesn't explain why they're there in the first place. Like,
Yeah. Well, I know Washington has 4 accepted records of Vega.
Okay.
And I mean, this is fairly recent, less than 20 years ago. I think 2005, 2006 was their first record. But there was a recent bird about a year ago, Dave Irons had, and Shawneen Finnegan, a second cycle, very nice looking Vega gull. But like you said, there's so many weird things on the Pacific, things that can be darker gray than your typical Smithsonianus, that I'm sure these things are just in the mixed mess of Western / glaucous wing hybrids.
Yeah. We are learning a lot. I always tell people that when back in the day, the article that was sort of the Thayer's Gull article that Paul Lehman wrote in Birding magazine, if you look at some of the photographs, including the main photograph that starts the article, it's to me now obviously a hybrid. It's not a Thayer's gull. But in those days, we didn't know that these hybrids existed, these herring, glaucous wing hybrids, that they were common. And there's a lot that's happened just in the last 20 years that clarifies things. And with that in mind, do you think we're almost there, or do you think we're going to have some major new things that somebody will figure out that will clarify? Are you open to the fact that we may have missed something completely novel in some of these gulls, that somebody's going to say, look at this, and we're going to go, oh, well, that explains it? Or do you think we're mainly there in terms of we're just sorting out the details now?
Well, I think anywhere north of, say, British Columbia, we still have no foothold, unlike the glaucous wings, the Seward gulls, why some glaucous wings are dark in Asia, and then why over here they're hybrids. I think if any graduate student is really interested in these type of questions, go after the glaucous wings and try to get a good perspective on the different populations of glaucous wing gulls. Because that, I'm sure you'd agree, is a big part of this puzzle. Is why do they hybridize with everything they come into contact with? and why are they so variable throughout the Bering Sea? How many of them are hybrids? How many of them are pure glaucous wing gulls? So that I think we're way behind on. But everything else, in the lower 48, I think we're doing well with California gulls, ring-billed gulls, Franklin's gulls. I think it's the glaucous wings and the Icelands primarily when it comes to North America.
Like the troublesome ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And our problems are very small compared to what's happening in, say, Eastern Asia right now and Western Europe. You think, like, we have hybrids. They're yellow-legged herring gulls, and they're Caspian herring gulls, and Hoogland's gulls, and the Baltic gulls. That is fascinating stuff. Barabensis, Hoogland steppe gulls. So if we could just get a better handle on glaucous wing gulls, I think we're on our way, Alvaro.
We're on our way. We're almost there. You mentioned all of these crazy birds from Asia. I was actually just booking today tickets to my tour in winter in Japan, and I've allotted 2.5, maybe 3 days to just go gull watching, which I don't do with the clients. We do sort of minor level gull watching where we go and see the various species, but it's I think a little too much my level of gull watching, where I'll be there all day just photographing and assessing, and then I go there with questions, like this. The question now is Mongolian gull, and that's one of them. It's like, can I find real Mongolian gulls here, and am I confident? How do I tell them apart from anything else? These are the things. Gulls. This is how I entertain myself, everybody. This is my vacation.
Well, good. What month will you be there?
February.
Okay. Yeah. That's very good. Yeah. To me, gentlemen, there's really nothing more exciting than standing seaside or lakeside and chumming some gulls and taking apart the flock. And it's even more enjoyable when you have birders with you and people are calling out different things and there's chaos and you're confused at what bird are you referring to and which one should I look at first. You've been to the Gull Frolic, right? Both of you have.
Yeah. Fantastic time.
We do that in mid-February. And to me, that's one of the most enjoyable times of the year where you're showing people, here's a Nelson's and here's a second cycle Thayer's and a first cycle lesser blackback. That's very exciting birding for me. Like, I've been on rail walks and owling and all that stuff's cool and exciting, but nothing really does it for me like gull watching. It's just a different vibe.
I've tried to emulate you a little bit, Amar, with the Gull Frolic here a couple times in Philly. I haven't done it recently, but we've like kind of gathered at one of the piers on the Delaware River in like downtown Philly, and I've been like, hey, just come by. We're gonna, I've saved my leftovers from various meals, and I'm gonna do a little gull chum. And we'll just, we'll see what comes in. If it's 5 gulls, that's great. If it's 500, that's great too. And we'll just kind of enjoy and talk and see what we see. And it's actually been a lot of fun when we've done that. Like, it's fun socially, but people start to kind of get it, I think. The Gull Frolic inspired me to do that. It's also the only event I've ever been to that is called a frolic, which was well conceived.
We got to get you guys back up there. We got to get you guys back out there. But I think that's what beginning and even experienced birders need. They need to be in a crowd and they need to have that interaction where we're talking about right there what we're seeing.
Some context.
Why this is. Yeah, some context, because the online circular debates and discussions are a lot of times just dead ends.
Yeah.
I would suggest, George, you should get one of the big Scrapple companies to send you 10 tons of Scrapple to give to the gulls, because that is a moderately good use for that product.
I've never done scrapple. Frankly, I think that would be a poor use of good scrapple. But what I have done is gone to the butchers, and they don't really do this anymore, and tried to get beef fat that they were discarding. That makes for very satisfying gull food in the frigid months of the winter here. But
well, I know firsthand, George, that you make some good chum because 6 or 7 years ago, I came out to the Bucks County CBC and I stayed at your place. And the next morning, I felt like a drug addict. I was like, I need some chum. You got some chum? And this guy goes into the freezer and he has these blocks of chum already prepared. And he's like, good luck. I was like, all right, this is on my way to the airport the next day. So I wanted to make some stops and it worked. It worked. I had ring-billed gulls in a parking lot and then in come these great blackbacks and they're just like ripping this stuff apart. So I don't know what you had in that concoction, but it definitely did the job.
Yeah, it's sort of like my cooking. I can never repeat it. I occasionally I get something right, but I never cook from a recipe. So I never if something's good, so people are like, what was it? I'm like, I have no idea what I did this time, so similar with the chum.
Good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff.
Frozen chum blocks. That is where it's at. So Amar, I know you've internationally, tell us aside from Japan, because I know Al's talked about it, and you've spent time there as well, gull watching, some other international spots where you've been gull watching that you've enjoyed.
The UK is great for common gulls and European herring gulls. Southwest Portugal for lesser blackbacks and yellow-legged gulls. The Azores is one of my favorite visits of all time. Firsthand experience with Azores gulls. I spent like 2 weeks just staring at these interesting, what look like intermediate, halfway between a yellow-legged gull, Michaelis, and a lesser blackback gull. So that was a fun visit, just being on these remote islands just for Azores gulls. But probably hands down, my favorite trip was to Peru, South America.
I need those ones.
Yeah, because that was just a whole new perspective for me, seeing flocks of gray-hooded gulls and gray gulls and belchers and of course the kelp gulls, because that's primarily why I went down there, is to see flocks of kelp gulls. And lo and behold, not even 5 minutes of birding when I got to Lima, I started to notice some weird patterns on the kelp gulls. And it eventually turned into a paper that went into Western Birds. But I found, I should say, they were molting flight feathers in their pre-alternate molts at a time when they should just be molting a few body feathers. So I literally had to look at my phone and make sure it was October, November, because I went down there expecting these birds are going to be in alternate plumage or breeding plumage, and found something radically different. We found that a lot of those birds down there, at least in Peru, they only seem to go through 3 molt cycles before becoming adult-like. Whereas like most kelp gulls around the world take 4 cycles. And so there's this question that nobody knows an answer to, like, why are they racing to become adult-like in 3 cycles? So that was neat. And that was probably one of my favorite trips of all time.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, that would be an interesting little website you could do, sort of just your best top gull watching places on Earth for your Amar's guide. Instead of Michelin stars, it'll be Ayyash stars for which 1, 2, or 3 stars. But one last question: you have it's a kittiwake on the cover and kittiwakes on the back. The beautiful image, it's Ryan Sanderson's young kittiwake image in the front. I can see why you chose it. But did you have trouble? Did you have multiple images you're going through, or did you see this one image at one point and said, "That's it. I don't care. That's the one that goes in the front"?
No. So about halfway through the book project, like 3 years in, I started an album labeled possible cover photos, and I had probably a dozen photos in there. Sabin's was in there, Franklin's was in there, Iceland was in there, and it was almost Sabin's Gull, gentlemen. Like last minute change we made. We went with the Kittiwake. The Sabin's Gull was kind of grainy, but it was a sharp image. I'll share it with you one day. And decided last minute we're going to go with Kittiwake just because it looks better with the overall theme, black and white they had on the cover.
Tarek.
Yeah, I know that Ryan listens to this show, as he has made me a T-shirt based on the Nostradamus concept, the Nostradamus. And I was thinking he probably, paid you off to have this cover done. It's $100, $200. I don't know what Amar sells himself for this cover, but you've clarified that that's not the case. And shame on me for thinking something like that was nefarious was going on here.
So all right, this will be my last, because I know you guys got to wrap this up. But the Sabin's Gull it was almost a go, was photographed in England, and part of the decision making was I wanted a bird from the Great Lakes. I wanted a bird from Lake Michigan, right here in my backyard on Lake Michigan, and so we went with the Kittiwake.
Yeah. And Ryan's one of the best photographers out there doing this kind of stuff. He's pretty awesome. That's his work. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Amar. I feel like we could easily go another hour here. I have a list of questions that I've maybe gotten a quarter of the way through here, and I'm sure Al could just wax poetic with you about these, our favorite beasts. But first of all, congratulations. This really is a beautiful book. As we've said, encourage everybody to go out and get it. You must have some speaking engagements coming up as a result. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be at Rio Grande in a few weeks, and then I'll be at Space Coast in January. In fact, I'll be at your neck of the woods, Pennsylvania, at the Academy in mid-December. And then we have just a whole list of assignments here that I'll get to eventually. But I look forward to seeing folks throughout the winter season. Get out there, dive into the gulls. This is a perfect time of year to be doing it. Nice. Excellent. Well, thanks so much. And thanks for listening, everybody.